September 30th, 1993. 8:30 in the morning.
Right.
It's a brisk autumn day in Brooklyn. We are inside the Chase Manhattan Bank at 7th Avenue and Carroll Street, and the scene is just total chaos.
Yeah. Absolute nightmare scenario right out of the gate.
Exactly. Two masked robbers have just stormed the building, triggering the alarm. And inside, there are only two female tellers and an unarmed 60-year-old male security guard.
Which is, they are completely defenseless.
Completely. And the robbers, they immediately seize control in just the most brutal, terrifying way imaginable.
Right. They don't even hesitate.
No. They take a .357 Magnum, crack the security guard across the skull with it, drag his bleeding body to the men's room, and lock him inside.
Oh, man.
And one of the tellers gets the exact same pistol whipping treatment. Like, they aren't just looking for cash here.
Right. They are establishing absolute dominance through violence. It's a psychological takeover.
Exactly. And then the true terror starts. One of the robbers turns to the second teller, shoves the cold steel barrel of that Magnum directly into her mouth, and he pulls the trigger.
It is just a paralyzing moment of absolute finality. The teller is waiting for the end.
She is. And what happens is an empty click.
Wow.
The chamber was empty. The robber leans in, looks her dead in the eyes, and says, "Next one is real. Now open the vault."
That gives me chills. Just terrifying.
Right. So we are dealing with a full-blown bank robbery with hostages, and the stakes literally could not be higher.
Absolutely.
So welcome to your custom deep dive. Today's mission is to unpack this incredibly intense, high-stakes source document written by the FBI negotiator who was actually called to this very scene.
Yeah, the guy who had to pick up the phone.
Exactly. But let me be entirely clear right up front, to the listener. We are not here to just do some true crime recap.
No, not at all.
We are using this life or death standoff as a masterclass in human psychology, behavioral science, and communication.
Which is really what it is. It's a laboratory for human behavior under extreme stress.
Right. We're going to extract the core tenets of crisis negotiation and translate them into strategies you can apply to everyday life.
Yeah, whether that means dealing with an overbearing boss.
Totally.
Or navigating a tense contract dispute. Or just getting someone to truly deeply listen to you.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we get into the tactical breakdown of what happened on the phones that day, we have to establish the context of the man walking into the situation.
Yeah, the background of the author is vital here because it sets up a massive psychological contrast.
Right.
Because this Brooklyn bank was his very first feet-to-the-fire, in-your-face hostage job as an FBI negotiator.
His first one.
His first live one. He had been through the rigorous training, he knew the theory, but he hadn't yet tested these specific conversational frameworks in a live, unpredictable scenario with actual civilians on the line.
And what makes this so wild is what he was doing literally days before this call came in.
Oh, it's such a crazy pivot.
Right, because he had been assigned to the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force in New York.
Right. He had just come off a historic, career-defining win as the co-case agent on an investigation that thwarted a massive, coordinated bomb plot.
Yeah, a plot with unimaginable casualty projections. The terrorists were in the final stages of planning to detonate explosives in the Holland and Lincoln tunnels.
The arteries of the city.
Exactly. And at the United Nations building, and even at the FBI's own headquarters in Lower Manhattan.
The audacity.
Right. And the task force broke down the doors and stopped the plot right as the cell members were actively mixing the chemical explosives in a safe house.
So you go from dismantling a highly sophisticated international terror cell intent on crippling New York City to a local bank robbery in Brooklyn.
Yeah, a huge shift in scale.
On paper, stepping into that bank standoff would seem like a massive step down in complexity. You would assume the author felt overqualified.
You would assume that, yeah. And honestly, so did many of the local commanders on the ground.
Right.
But the author's own reflection totally subverts that expectation.
How so? Well, he explicitly notes that this supposedly small robbery, not the international bomb plot, was the defining crucible of his career.
Wow. Really?
Yeah. It was the specific moment that sparked his lifelong obsession with the granular mechanics of negotiation.
That's fascinating.
Because the psychological warfare that took place both inside and outside that bank over the next few hours, it proved to be far more intricate than tracking down bomb makers.
Okay, so to understand how to dismantle a high-pressure situation like that, we first have to examine the immediate psychological trap that almost doomed the police response that morning.
Oh, the trap we all fall into.
Yes, a trap that we all fall into in our daily lives, particularly in corporate environments, I think.
For sure.
It's the danger of thinking we already know exactly what's going on.
Assumption. The mother of all mistakes.
Exactly. When the police and the FBI set up their command post across the street, they walked right into this trap, right?
They absolutely did. So the initial call triggered the alarm around 8:30 a.m., right? And the tactical and negotiation teams were in position by roughly 10:30 a.m.
Okay.
But among the senior commanders directing the operation, the prevailing attitude was bizarrely relaxed.
Relaxed, with hostages and guns.
Yeah, they operated under the assumption that this was going to be a cookie-cutter, by-the-book, short and sweet event.
You're kidding.
No, they were openly predicting that they would wrap the entire thing up in about 10 minutes.
10 minutes? That is a staggering level of overconfidence for a situation involving a firearm, hostages, and a sealed building.
It really is.
Where does that kind of institutional arrogance come from? It can't just be blind optimism, right?
No, it rarely is just blind optimism. In this case, it was the result of a cognitive vulnerability known as anchoring bias.
Okay, anchoring bias. Break that down for us.
So it was triggered by early, unverified intelligence. As the teams were arriving, a piece of information filtered through the ranks, suggesting that the bank robbers were already looking for a way to surrender. Right. The command structure latched onto that single data point. They built their entire operational expectation around it.
They heard what they wanted to hear.
Exactly. They wanted an easy resolution. The data hinted at an easy resolution, so they anchored their reality to it.
Wow.
They even communicated this optimism to the press, gathered at the perimeter, basically projecting a swift, peaceful surrender to the media.
So they committed to a narrative publicly before they had actually tested it privately.
Yep. And that surrender intelligence, it turned out to be completely fabricated.
Oh, wow.
It was a deliberate tactical route.
From the robbers.
Yeah. The ringleader inside the bank planted that information specifically to buy time and freeze the police response.
That's actually pretty brilliant.
It's terrifyingly smart. So when the 10-minute mark passed and then the first hour passed, the commanders were left scrambling and deeply embarrassed.
Because they had fallen victim to their own assumptions.
Exactly. And the source draws a stark line here. You know, average negotiators go into a room expecting surprises. But great negotiators, they use their skills to reveal the surprises they know for a fact are already hiding beneath the surface.
I love that. That is a fundamental shift in posture. It's the difference between bracing for an inevitable impact and like actively interrogating the environment to find the hidden variables.
Yeah, and this leads directly into a counterintuitive point the text makes about intelligence.
Which is what?
That really smart, highly educated people often make the absolute worst negotiators.
Wait, the worst.
Yeah, because they possess high cognitive bandwidth, they develop a habit of pre-computing outcomes.
Oh, I see.
They walk into a room believing they have already mapped out all the permutations of the conversation before they even open their mouths.
So they accept their own biases as objective facts.
Precisely. Their perceptual windows become entirely clouded by their own intellectual arrogance.
Wow.
Which causes them to actively ignore new data that contradicts their foregone conclusions.
So you're essentially writing the third act of the movie while the opening credits are still rolling.
That's a great way to put it.
And inside the bank, the lead hostage taker was brilliantly exploiting those exact cognitive biases.
He really was.
He was running what the author describes as a localized counterintelligence operation against the NYPD and the FBI.
Yeah, he fed them a constant stream of misinformation designed to trigger their worst assumptions.
For example, he wanted the police to believe he wasn't alone with just one other guy, right?
Right.
He wanted them to think that he was part of a highly volatile, well-armed, multinational crew of hardened criminals.
He was conjuring a phantom army to intimidate the tactical teams and complicate the negotiation.
Yes. And he accomplished this deception almost entirely through his linguistic choices, specifically his use of personal pronouns.
This is such a cool detail.
Right. What's fascinating here is the psychological weight that a single word can carry in a negotiation. The text points out that the leader actively avoided the words me and I.
Yes, very intentionally.
Instead, he constantly relied on we and they. He would tell the police, my partners want this, or I have to check with the other guys, or getting trigger happy.
He was systematically deferring authority to an invisible committee.
Right. And the source identifies this as a critical conversational tell that seasoned negotiators listen for, right?
Oh, absolutely. The less important someone makes themselves sound in a negotiation, the more they defer to a vague collective or an absent boss, the more important they probably are.
That is so counterintuitive, but it makes total sense.
It does. Conversely, an individual who constantly centers themselves, overusing me and I, is frequently overcompensating for a lack of genuine decision-making power.
Wait, I need to push back on this framing for a second.
Okay, lay it on me.
We are criticizing the commanders for relying on their assumptions, right?
Right.
And we are talking about the danger of pre-computing outcomes.
Yeah.
But isn't relying on past experience exactly what makes someone an expert? Like, if a seasoned detective has seen 100 bank robberies, shouldn't they use that vast database of experience to recognize the pattern and predict the outcome?
I see where you're going.
It sounds like the text is arguing that having experience is actually a liability.
That tension right there is exactly what separates competent professionals from elite practitioners.
Okay, tell me more.
The source does not argue that experience is a liability. Experience is the foundational database. The liability lies entirely in how you frame that experience.
Ah, the framing.
Yeah. If a detective uses past cases to form a rigid assumption, concluding this is a standard 10-minute surrender because my last 3 cases were, they are blinding themselves to the unique variables of the present moment.
Right, because no two situations are identical.
Exactly. So how does an elite negotiator utilize their experience without falling into the trap of rigid assumptions?
That's the million-dollar question.
The text advocates for a framework of holding multiple hypotheses simultaneously.
Multiple hypotheses.
Yes. Your experience provides you with a menu of probable scenarios, but you do not commit to any of them.
You stay flexible.
You approach the interaction with what the author calls a mindset of discovery.
A mindset of discovery. I really like that. It is basically the scientific method applied to human conversation.
That is the precise mechanism. You walk into the negotiation not with a conclusion, but with a handful of educated, experience-backed hypotheses.
Right.
You remain hyper-present in the moment. Every new piece of psychological insight, every linguistic tell, every shift in tone is treated as fresh data.
You're constantly updating the model.
Exactly. You use that incoming data to winnow the true hypotheses from the false ones. Your primary goal at the outset is not to persuade or to win.
It's not.
No. Your goal is to extract and observe as much raw information as humanly possible to figure out which reality you are actually operating in.
A mindset of discovery that completely rewires the dynamic.
It really does.
You aren't stepping into a battle arena. You are stepping into an investigation. But the command structure at the bank failed initially because they weren't investigating. They thought they had the answer key.
Yeah, they thought they knew the ending before Chapter 1 was over.
And to actually engage in discovery, to gather that raw information, you have to possess the ability to truly listen.
Which is much harder than people think.
Exactly, which introduces a massive biological and psychological hurdle. As the source details, listening is exceptionally difficult when there are too many competing voices.
Oh, yeah.
Especially the voices echoing inside your own head.
Right. And the physical environment the FBI was forced to operate in at the bank served as this perfect physical metaphor for the psychological chaos of the standoff.
It sounds claustrophobic.
It was. The FBI set up their Negotiation Operations Center, they call it the NOC, in a small office inside another bank directly across the street from the hostage site.
The text notes it was less than 30 yards away.
30 yards.
They were practically sharing a driveway with an armed, erratic gunman.
Yeah, they were entirely too close. In a worst-case scenario crisis intervention, you desperately need physical distance to enforce psychological distance.
That makes a lot of sense.
The lack of a proper spatial buffer severely compromised their ability to maintain objective detachment. But despite that claustrophobic environment, they deployed a highly structured team methodology.
Okay, so it wasn't just one guy.
No. The author was initially assigned as a coach to the primary NYPD negotiator, an officer named Joe.
Okay, because the prevailing image we get from movies is the lone maverick negotiator, right?
Yeah.
Sitting in a dark room, sweating over a landline, negotiating for hours by himself.
Oh, the lone wolf negotiator is a total Hollywood myth.
Really?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The FBI utilizes a rigorous team approach because human cognition is just too fragile to handle the load alone.
Interesting.
You have one designated individual on the phone, in this instance, Joe, but he is supported by up to 5 other highly trained professionals in the room with him.
5 other people just listening.
Yeah, and they're not just standing around. They are actively passing notes, parsing sentences in real time, attempting to gauge the emotional state of the hostage taker.
They're a whole processing unit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They are listening for those subtle linguistic clues.
I can hear a skeptic out there thinking, you need 6 federal agents just to listen to one guy on a phone. That sounds like bureaucratic overkill.
Yeah, the author encounters that exact skepticism from corporate clients and students all the time.
I bet.
But the takeaway is profound.
Huh.
If the premier law enforcement agency on the planet has determined that their best agents cannot effectively listen to a single conversation without a 5-person support staff,
Right.
that should be a massive wake-up call for how poorly the rest of us actually listen.
Wow. That is a gut punch.
We treat listening as a passive, automatic biological function, like breathing.
But it's not?
No.
Yeah.
It is an intensely demanding cognitive activity. We are constantly derailed by selective hearing, confirmation bias, and emotional reactivity.
To explain the mechanics of why listening is so hard, the text brings in a foundational piece of psychological research from George A. Miller. Let's dig into that cognitive bottleneck.
Okay, so George A. Miller authored a landmark research paper demonstrating a fundamental limitation of the human brain.
Which is?
Our conscious working memory can only process roughly 7 pieces of information at any given moment.
7, that's it.
That's it. Our processing bandwidth is shockingly narrow.
Okay, so if my conscious brain is capped at 7 discrete thoughts, what is actually happening when I step into a high-stakes negotiation?
Well,
Like, let's say I'm walking into my boss's office to demand a massive raise, or I'm sitting down with my partner to have a highly contentious argument about our finances. How does Miller's Law dictate my behavior?
it dictates that you are likely operating in a state of psychological gridlock.
Gridlock.
Yeah. The overwhelming majority of people conceptualize negotiation as a battle of logic and arguments.
Right. I'm trying to win.
So while your boss or your partner is speaking, you are not allocating your 7 slots of cognitive capacity to processing their words or their emotional state.
What am I doing instead?
You are consuming your limited bandwidth, formulating your rebuttal.
Oh.
You're retrieving data points to prove them wrong, policing your own facial expressions, and managing your rising internal frustration.
Wow. It is the cognitive equivalent of having dozens of heavy browser tabs open simultaneously,
Yes.
all playing different loud audio tracks while you try to solve a complex math puzzle. The system just crashes.
That's exactly it. And the author describes this dynamic as a state of schizophrenia.
Schizophrenia.
Yeah, because to an outside observer, it appears to be a conversation between 2 people.
Right.
But in reality, it is a chaotic overlap of 4 distinct voices.
4.
You have the 2 voices speaking out loud and the 2 intense internal monologues screaming inside each person's head.
Oh, man. That is so true.
Both parties are exclusively focused on their internal monologue. And because of Miller's limitation, they are failing to process even that effectively.
So if the default state of a heated conversation is 4 overlapping voices fighting for a 7-slot cognitive limit, how do we fix it?
Right. How do we close the tabs?
Exactly. How do we close the browser tabs and cure this conversational schizophrenia?
The tactic required is conceptually simple, but demands immense emotional discipline.
Okay.
To quiet the frantic voice in your own head and simultaneously quiet the defensive voice in their head, you must make your singular, all-encompassing focus the other person.
Make it entirely about them.
You must completely abandon your offensive strategy. In the initial stages of a negotiation, you should not be devoting a single ounce of cognitive energy to formulating your counterargument.
You essentially have to drop your weapons and walk out into no man's land.
Yeah, you deploy true active listening, and you are listening for a very specific distinction outlined in the text: the difference between their wants and their needs.
Wants versus needs.
Yes. Wants are surface-level demands. They represent aspirations and illusions of control.
Like, I want a helicopter and $1 million in unmarked bills.
Exactly. Needs, however, are foundational. They are rooted in survival, security, and vulnerability.
So, I need to feel respected. I need to know I am not going to die in this bank.
Precisely.
Yeah.
By focusing all your bandwidth on identifying and validating those underlying emotional needs, you create an environment of psychological safety.
Okay.
When the counterpart feels genuinely heard and safe, The defensive, frantic voice in their head finally begins to subside.
That makes total sense.
Okay.
And this philosophy of intense, egoless listening to uncover the hidden reality, it leads us to one of the most bizarre and illuminating plot twists from the Brooklyn standoff.
Oh, this twist is wild.
When the authorities finally pieced together the truth of what was happening inside that building, the scale of the deception was stunning.
It really was.
The lead bank robber, the man who was confidently demanding a getaway van and coordinating a supposedly massive team, was not an international terrorist mastermind.
No, not even close.
He was a local cash courier. He actually serviced that specific Chase Manhattan branch.
Right. So he was intimately familiar with the layout, the staff, and the schedule.
Exactly. But the truly staggering revelation was the deception he perpetrated against his own crew.
This part is just crazy.
He had completely lied to his partners.
Yeah, totally manipulated them.
The men he brought with him to storm the bank had absolutely no idea they were walking into an armed robbery.
None at all. They operated under the belief that they were executing a simple, victimless burglary of an ATM machine before the bank opened.
Right. Taking hostages, holding guns to the heads of tellers, that was never part of the agreement.
This creates a deeply ironic and volatile dynamic.
How so?
Well, the co-conspirators inside the bank were, in a very real psychological sense, also hostages.
Wow, I never thought about it like that.
Yeah, they were trapped in an escalating life-or-death crisis orchestrated by their own supposed leader.
Facing federal prison or death.
Exactly, without ever consenting to the risk.
This perfectly illustrates the lethal danger of the commander's early assumptions.
It really does.
If the police had rigidly held on to the belief that they were facing a unified, ideologically driven terror cell,
Right.
they would have completely missed the massive internal fractures within the hostage takers' ranks.
And it was exactly this disconnect, this internal betrayal and confusion that the negotiation team eventually recognized and leveraged to drive a wedge between the leader and his crew.
But uncovering those deep structural fractures, and creating the psychological safety necessary for the real story to emerge, requires a critical and highly counterintuitive tactic.
Oh, yes.
It is a tactic that feels viscerally wrong when adrenaline is flooding your system and lives are on the line.
It goes against every instinct,
You have to intentionally move at a snail's pace.
slowing it down.
Time is arguably the most misunderstood and mismanaged variable in any crisis.
For sure.
The text provides a fascinating critique of Joe, the initial NYPD negotiator who took the first shift on the phone.
Right. Joe is doing his best, but
The author notes that Joe was competent. He was keeping the leader engaged, but he was severely handicapped by the standard law enforcement training of the early 1990s.
yeah, the training back then was, well, the author uses a brilliantly dismissive acronym to describe the prevailing methodology of that era.
MSU.
MSU, making shit up.
Amazing.
The negotiation playbook was essentially a crude mixture of improvisation and sleazy, high-pressure sales tactics.
Like a used car salesman.
Exactly. They were constantly trying to manipulate, coerce, or logically persuade the hostage taker into immediate compliance.
The primary flaw in that 90s approach was the obsession with speed.
Everything had to be fast.
The negotiators were in a desperate hurry. They were pushing aggressively for a fast, neat resolution.
Right.
The text describes their mindset perfectly. They viewed themselves as problem solvers, not people movers.
Which is an entirely natural human instinct.
Sure.
When confronted with an agonizing problem, especially one involving imminent physical violence, the biological imperative is to neutralize the threat as rapidly as possible.
You want to rip the Band-Aid off.
Right. But in high-stakes human interaction, prioritizing speed over rapport is a fatal error.
Why does speed destroy the negotiation?
Because velocity telegraphs intention.
Ooh, say more about that.
When you rush a negotiation, pushing past the counterpart's emotional expressions to get to the logistical solution, the counterpart immediately senses that they are not being heard.
Right.
It signals that you place zero value on their perspective or their safety, and that your only objective is achieving your own institutional goals.
Wow. Which instantly incinerates trust.
Exactly. The FBI eventually recognized that intentionally slowing the tempo of the conversation naturally drains the emotional volatility from the room.
It de-escalates by default.
And there is a very grim, undeniable underlying logic utilized by law enforcement here.
What's that?
If someone is talking to you, they are not shooting someone else.
Man, that is a chilling reality. Every agonizing minute spent discussing the logistics of delivering a pizza is a minute where the firearm remains lowered.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And by deliberately dragging their feet, The negotiation team didn't just prevent violence, they actively bought the time necessary for a massive investigative breakthrough.
Okay, tell us about that. What happened outside while they were stalling on the phone?
So, inside the bank, the ringleader was deploying constant tactical smoke screens. He would aggressively demand food for the hostages.
Okay.
The police would spend 30 minutes rigging a robotic delivery system. The moment the robot approached, the leader would abruptly change his mind, claim they found stale bagels in the break room, and hang up the phone.
So he was just stalling, changing the subject, trying to exhaust the negotiators.
Right. But the police turned that delay against him. They utilized the time to execute a brilliant piece of quiet detective work.
How so?
While the negotiator kept the leader entangled in these slow, circular arguments on the phone, a team of investigators was scouring the streets surrounding the bank.
Okay.
They systematically ran the license plates of every single vehicle parked in the vicinity.
Every single car on the block?
Every single one. They cross-referenced the registrations and tracked down the owners of dozens of cars, eliminating them one by one.
Wow.
Until they found a single vehicle that could not be accounted for.
A needle in a haystack.
Exactly. And the registration on that vehicle belonged to a man named Chris Voss.
So they have a name, Chris Voss. But in a life-or-death scenario, an educated guess based on a parked car isn't actionable intelligence. They needed absolute confirmation that the man on the phone was Chris Voss.
Right, which required even more time.
Of course.
Continuing to use the slow-paced phone negotiation as cover, detectives drove to the residential address listed on Chris Voss's registration.
Okay.
They found an acquaintance who knew him intimately. They put this civilian in a police cruiser, drove them back to the command post, and set them up as an ear witness.
An ear witness?
Yeah. Because they had no visual feed inside the bank, the acquaintance simply listened to the live audio of the negotiation.
And
They immediately and positively identified the voice on the phone as Chris Voss.
boom. The text notes the profound shift in leverage. They now knew more about the adversary than he thought they knew.
Massive advantage.
They pierce his anonymity, entirely flipping the power dynamic without ever raising their voices or firing a single shot, simply by pumping the brakes.
Simply by slowing down.
So what does this all mean for us outside of a hostage scenario?
Right. How do we use this?
We operate in a corporate and social culture that absolutely worships the altar of efficiency. We are bombarded with life hacks designed to speed up our routines, to compress meetings into emails, to achieve inbox zero faster.
Faster.
We equate speed with competence. But here, in a crucible where every passing second feels like torture, the ultimate operational hack is intentionally slowing down.
It directly subverts our cultural conditioning. But human emotion, particularly fear and anger, does not operate on an efficient corporate timeline.
That is so true.
It requires vast amounts of unstructured space to decompress. If you try to force emotional resolution onto a spreadsheet schedule, you will trigger a defensive explosion.
Now, despite the success of the stalling tactics, about 5 hours into this slow burn, the situation hits a dangerous plateau.
Yeah, they hit a wall.
The negotiation severely stalls. Chris Voss is just playing games, repeating demands, and refusing to make concessions.
Either getting comfortable.
So the commanders realize they need a structural shift to break the stalemate, but they are desperate to avoid escalating to a tactical breach. So they execute a highly unorthodox personnel swap.
This is where things get really interesting.
They pull Joe off the line and put the author into the primary seat.
Right.
And the very first tool the author deploys to fracture the stalemate is not a brilliant logical argument.
Nope.
It is not a veiled threat. It is the raw biological resonance of his own vocal cords.
Yeah, this moment represents one of the most fascinating psychological pivots detailed in the source document.
Break it down for us.
So the author assumes control of the phone with absolutely zero warning to the hostage taker.
Just a cold swap.
Yeah. Standard crisis protocol dictates a smooth, highly managed transition to avoid startling the suspect. But the lieutenant commanding the NOC wanted to intentionally jolt the dynamic.
Okay.
The author picks up the receiver, and Chris Voss immediately detects the anomaly. He demands, "Hey, what happened to Joe?"
And the author delivers his response. Joe's gone. This is Chris. You're talking to me now.
Oh, right.
But the power wasn't in the words themselves. It was entirely in the delivery. He utilized what he refers to as the late-night FM DJ voice.
The voice of absolute, unshakable calm.
The late-night FM DJ voice. I love that term.
It's so evocative.
Yeah.
And the text breaks down the reality that we do not have a single speaking voice. We essentially possess a three-part vocal arsenal that we can deploy in any high-stakes interaction.
Let's examine this arsenal. What is the first voice, and when should we use it?
The first is the direct or assertive voice. And the expert consensus in the text is unequivocal. You should almost never use it.
Feller.
Almost never. Deploying the assertive voice in a tense situation is the strategic equivalent of slapping yourself in the face while trying to run a marathon.
That sounds counterproductive.
Very.
Yeah.
It broadcasts dominance and aggression. When you attempt to verbally dominate a counterpart, their natural mammalian reflex is to push back.
Fight or flight.
Exactly. It triggers the amygdala. They will either aggressively escalate the conflict, or they will retreat into passive-aggressive resistance, silently sabotaging your efforts. It basically guarantees friction.
Okay, so the assertive voice is a huge liability.
Right.
What is the second tool in the arsenal?
The second is the positive, playful voice.
Playful.
Yeah. According to the author, this should be your default setting for the vast majority of everyday interactions.
Okay.
It is the voice of an easygoing, good-natured, empathetic person. The emotional attitude is light and intensely encouraging.
Like you're chatting with a friend.
Exactly. But the absolute key to unlocking the power of this voice is entirely physical.
What do you mean?
You cannot fake it with pitch alone. You must physically relax your facial muscles and smile while you're speaking.
Wait, smile. Even if you are on a phone call and the other person cannot see you?
Especially on a phone call.
Really?
Yeah, the mechanics of human speech are deeply physical. A genuine physical smile actually alters the shape of your vocal tract.
I had no idea.
It subtly shifts the tonal resonance and frequency of your words, and the counterpart's brain unconsciously detects that specific tonal shift.
That is wild.
Plus, the act of smiling triggers neurological changes within your own brain. It measurably increases cognitive agility.
Wow.
It makes both the speaker and the listener process information more rapidly and primes them for collaborative problem solving rather than adversarial combat.
The source provides a brilliant, highly relatable, real-world example of this positive, playful voice in action, far removed from the violence of a bank robbery.
Oh, I know the one you mean.
It involves a negotiation in the famous spice markets of Istanbul.
Yes. The author details a trip taken by an instructor from his consulting firm, the Black Swan Group.
Right.
This instructor, a highly trained professional negotiator, went on vacation to Turkey with his girlfriend. Now, the Istanbul markets are legendary for their haggling culture.
Right. It's basically a sport there.
It is an ancient, highly evolved art form. The merchants possess finely honed emotional intelligence and utilize aggressive hospitality to draw tourists into a psychological commitment.
So, tough crowd for a professional negotiator.
Exactly. And the instructor found himself totally befuddled and frankly a bit embarrassed because his girlfriend, who had no formal training, was consistently securing significantly better prices than he was.
Because she was framing the interaction fundamentally differently.
Precisely. The instructor was likely treating the haggle as a zero-sum battle of attrition.
Assertive voice.
Yep. But his girlfriend approached each encounter as a joyful, low-stakes game. No matter how aggressively the merchants pushed their initial prices or feigned defense, she maintained a massive physical smile and a relentlessly playful vocal tone.
And it worked.
Like magic. That positive resonance bypassed the merchants' defensive barriers. It essentially primed their brains to view her as an ally in a shared game, leading them to willingly settle on a collaborative, mutually beneficial outcome.
That is incredible.
It demonstrates that these tonal triggers are cross-cultural and deeply rooted in our shared biology.
But the playful voice, no matter how disarming in a market, was wholly inappropriate for an armed standoff with a cornered criminal.
Oh, 100%. That would have been a disaster.
Which brings us to the third tool, the exact frequency the author targeted for Chris Voss, the late-night FM DJ voice.
The late-night FM DJ voice.
Break down the mechanics of this one.
Okay, so it's characterized by a deep, soft, slow, and intensely reassuring cadence.
Okay.
But the mechanical secret to unlocking this voice lies entirely in the inflection.
The inflection.
Yes, it requires a pronounced downward inflection at the end of the sentence.
Downward.
When you lower your pitch as you conclude a thought, you convey a single, incredibly powerful subconscious message. I am in absolute control and everything is going to be okay.
Let's contrast that to ensure absolute clarity. If I use an upward inflection, if I end my sentence by raising my pitch slightly, what does that signal?
An upward inflection mimics the structure of a question. It introduces an element of uncertainty and doubt.
Like, I think we should do this.
Exactly. It subtly communicates to the counterpart that you are seeking their approval or permission, which hands the psychological power and the lead directly back to them.
I see.
By strictly enforcing a downward inflection, the author was signaling to Chris Voss, I have this situation completely contained. It establishes a psychological boundary of safety.
And the text frames the effectiveness of this vocal tone through the concept of involuntary neurological telepathy.
Yes.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Involuntary neurological telepathy sounds like something pulled out of a science fiction novel, but we are talking about hard science here.
We are talking about evolutionary neuroscience and mirror neurons.
Okay, lay it out for us.
The human brain does not merely process the sterile dictionary definitions of the words being spoken. Operating largely below our conscious awareness, our brains are continuously analyzing the microexpressions, the vocal frequencies, the feelings, and the underlying intentions behind the behavior of others.
We're constantly reading the room without realizing it.
Exactly. We literally simulate and grasp what the other person is feeling.
Right.
Therefore, if you intentionally broadcast an aura of absolute calm and control through a low, slow, downward inflecting voice, you can physically bypass their conscious defenses.
Wow.
You can reach into their mammalian brain and flip an emotional switch, altering their physiological state from anxious and distrusting to calm and compliant, almost instantly.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here because this is a sticking point for a lot of people.
Go for it.
If I'm listening to this and I'm preparing for a massive performance review or an incredibly tense conversation with my spouse about our marriage, if I consciously decide to artificially lower my pitch and adopt this late-night DJ persona, won't I just come across as completely inauthentic?
That's a huge fear.
Isn't this just a form of theatrical manipulation?
It is a very common and understandable hesitation. The key is to separate your intent from the biological mechanics.
Okay.
You are not putting on a costume or doing a cheesy impression of a radio host. You are actively utilizing the physics of sound and mammalian biology to create a specific environment.
The environment.
Right. A high-pitched, rapid vocal delivery universally signals distress and panic to the mammalian brain.
For sure.
A low, slow, steady voice universally signals safety and containment. By deliberately managing your tone, you are not being fake. You're taking profound, mature responsibility for the emotional environment of the interaction.
Oh, I like that. Mature responsibility.
You are establishing a baseline frequency that says, I'm okay, you're okay, let's navigate this together.
So the author hits Chris Voss with the full force of the DJ voice. Joe's gone. You're talking to me now. Deep resonance, downward inflection, absolute calm.
And it noticeably rattles Watts.
It does. The sudden shift in authority destabilizes him and the tide begins to turn. But Watts is a cornered animal. He isn't ready to capitulate.
No, he desperately fights back to reestablish his dominance, and he chooses a terrifying method to do it.
What does he do?
Watts realizes he is losing the psychological high ground. He orders one of his accomplices to go down into the basement of the bank and drag up one of the female tellers who had hidden down there during the initial breach.
Oh, God.
He forces this profoundly terrified hostage onto the phone for just a few agonizing seconds. She manages to say, I'm okay.
And the author.
The author immediately tries to engage her, asking for her name, but before she can formulate an answer, Watts violently snatches the receiver back.
Man, it is a brutal, visceral power play. He is sending a very clear message. Do not forget who actually controls the physics of this situation. I hold human lives in my hands.
It was a highly sophisticated, subtle threat. By putting her on the line, he provided the police with proof of life, which was a tactical necessity to prevent the SWAT team from immediately storming the building.
Right.
But by snatching it back, he denied the negotiators any actionable intelligence or emotional connection with the hostage. He forcefully reclaimed the operational tempo.
So, confronted with this escalation, the author could not rely on logical persuasion.
Nope.
He certainly could not threaten Watts, as that would risk the teller's life.
Too risky.
He had to deploy a specific, highly refined conversational tool that he describes as the closest thing the FBI has to an actual Jedi mind trick.
We are entering the realm of mirroring.
Mirroring.
Yes. In the academic field of behavioral science, this phenomenon is known as isopraxism.
Isopraxism.
It is essentially the act of unconscious imitation. We observe it constantly throughout the animal kingdom, and within all strata of human society.
Mm.
It is the fundamental behavior where individuals copy each other to establish comfort and alignment. It can manifest as copying speech patterns, adopting similar body language, mirroring vocabulary, or matching the tempo of an interaction.
We see this all the time in social settings. You watch two people on a highly successful first date, and they will subconsciously lean across the table at the exact same moment or pick up their drinks in unison.
Exactly. The old adage, birds of a feather flock together, is biologically accurate.
Right.
Isopraxism is an unconscious, nonverbal signal that communicates, we are in sync, we share the same reality, you can trust me.
But while body language mirroring is a common social phenomenon, the specific version of mirroring utilized by FBI negotiators is hyper-focused, strictly verbal, and almost laughably simple in its construction.
It really is.
For an FBI agent, a mirror consists of nothing more than repeating the last three words, or the critical 1 to 3 words of the sentence the counterpart just spoke.
Just repeating them.
Just repeating their exact words back to them. On the surface, that sounds like a recipe for sounding like a condescending parrot.
Right. It sounds far too simplistic to be effective.
It sounds absurd until you understand the underlying neurological triggers.
Exactly. By precisely repeating their exact words, you bypass their critical thinking and trigger a deeply ingrained biological instinct.
How does their brain react?
The counterpart's unconscious mind immediately recognizes the linguistic similarity, feels a surge of comfort and validation, and inevitably feels a profound, almost irresistible compulsion to elaborate and sustain the connection.
They just have to keep talking.
Yes. And to validate how powerful this is outside of a hostage scenario, the source highlights a famous study conducted by psychologist Richard Wiseman.
Oh, the Wiseman-Waiter study. This is arguably one of the most illuminating examples in the entire document regarding everyday application.
It perfectly isolates the variable. Wiseman wanted to scientifically determine what communication style created a stronger bond and better financial outcome between strangers, positive reinforcement or mirroring.
Okay, so what was the setup?
He designed an experiment using two groups of restaurant waiters. Group A was instructed to use positive reinforcement.
So, praising the customer.
Right. When a customer ordered a meal, the waiter would lavish them with praise, utilizing enthusiastic phrases like, "Great choice, no problem," or "Excellent, I'll get that right out."
Okay, and Group B?
Group B was instructed to strictly mirror their customers. They offered no praise. They simply repeated the exact order back to the table. 1 burger, medium rare, side salad.
And the results of the study were absolutely staggering. The waiters who used the mirroring technique received 70% more in tips than the waiters who used positive reinforcement.
70%.
A 70% increase just for acting like an echo. Why does that happen? Why is telling someone they made a great choice actually less effective than just repeating the words medium rare?
Because of the subtle power dynamics embedded in language.
Elaborate on that.
When a waiter says great choice, they are inherently acting as an evaluator. They are placing themselves in a position of judgment over the customer.
Oh, wow. I never thought of that.
Even though it is positive judgment, it establishes a hierarchy where the waiter is the authority validating the customer's decision.
And what happens with the mirror?
But when a waiter simply mirrors the words, they're removing the hierarchy entirely. They're placing themselves side by side with the customer.
Collaborative.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It signals complete, unbroken attention and psychological alignment. It makes the customer feel deeply, fundamentally heard and validated without triggering any subconscious resistance to authority.
So how did the author weaponize this Jedi mind trick against a volatile bank robber?
Well, following the terrifying moment with the hostage on the phone, the author desperately needed to re-engage Chris Voss and get him talking.
Right.
He decided to leverage the intelligence they had gathered about the vehicles outside.
The parked cars.
Yeah. He casually mentioned to Watts that the police had identified the owners of every single car parked on the street, except for a blue and gray van. This direct challenge made Watts defensive, and he impulsively blurted out, "The other vehicle's not out there because you guys chased my driver away."
And here is where the author deploys the mirror. He simply replies, maintaining that incredibly calm, downward-inflecting DJ voice. "We chased your driver away."
It is the perfect tactical execution. He isolated the critical last words and repeated them with a slight inquisitive tone.
And what did Watts do?
The biological instinct instantly took over. Watts simply could not stop himself from filling the conversational void. He began what the author vividly describes as vomiting information.
Wow.
He elaborated rapidly, saying, well, when he's seen the police, he cut. Through the deployment of a single three-word mirror, Watts accidentally confirmed the existence of a getaway driver.
Which they didn't know about.
A critical piece of tactical intelligence that the FBI knew absolutely nothing about up to that moment.
It is an incredible triumph of technique. But what makes this source document so valuable is that the author does not portray himself as a flawless, omniscient superhero.
Oh, absolutely not. He is very honest.
He openly dissects a major, near-catastrophic blunder he made just moments after this success. He allowed his ego to take the wheel.
He did. Armed with the definitive knowledge that the van was registered to Chris Watts, and riding the high of the successful mirror, the author decided it was time to flex his intelligence.
Yeah, idea.
Very bad. He wanted the hostage taker to know the FBI was closing the net. He stated, "There's a vehicle out here, and it's registered to a Chris Watts."
And how did Watts react to that?
Watts, realizing he was exposed, retreated into silence and simply replied, "Okay," giving absolutely nothing away.
And then the author makes his critical error. He abandons the framework and asks a direct, aggressive question. He says, "Is he there? Is this you? Are you Chris Watts?"
It was a disastrous tactical regression. First, asking, "Are you Chris Watts?" is a closed-ended question.
Right, a yes or no question.
It invites a simple yes or no response, which allows the suspect to easily dodge the confrontation and shut down the dialogue.
And what was the second mistake?
But far more importantly, the author fundamentally violated the mechanical rules of the mirror.
How?
For a mirror to achieve its psychological impact, it absolutely must be followed by silence.
Silence.
You have to plant the mirrored words and then allow the silence to work on the counterpart's brain, building the pressure that forces them to elaborate.
And he didn't do that.
By rushing in with a rapid-fire sequence of direct questions, the author, as he puts it, stepped all over his mirror.
He didn't allow the silence to ripen. He didn't let the void make Watts uncomfortable.
Exactly.
But he realizes his mistake, and he manages to recover.
He does recover. Watts, utilizing the escape hatch the author provided, obviously answers no.
Right.
The author immediately recognizes his error, takes a breath, composes himself, and significantly slows his tempo back down. He deploys the mirror again, and this time, he enforces the discipline of silence.
Okay, what does he say?
He says, "No. You said okay," and then he completely shuts his mouth.
The immense, crushing power of the pause.
The resulting silence is pure agony for Watts.
I can imagine.
The combination of the mirror, which demands elaboration, followed by the absolute dead air from the negotiator, completely short-circuits his defenses. His voice noticeably goes up in pitch,
Which is a tell.
a universal physiological indicator of lost control and rising panic. He blurts out a few more fragmented sentences, becomes completely cognitively overwhelmed, and eventually just stops talking entirely.
Wow.
He is so profoundly rattled by the psychological pressure that he physically drops the phone and hands it to his accomplice.
I want to frame this specific sequence for the listener because while we are analyzing a hostage negotiation, this is an incredibly practical, simple hack for your next corporate networking event.
Oh, absolutely.
Or a dinner party where you find yourself cornered by a stranger and you have no idea how to sustain the conversation.
Yes.
Instead of burning your cognitive energy frantically trying to formulate a brilliant, insightful follow-up question, just repeat the last 3 words the person said, utilizing a slight upward inquisitive tone, and then simply shut up.
It feels like absolute magic in practice.
It forces the other person to continue expanding on their thought. It makes them feel as though you are deeply and intensely fascinated by their story. And it removes the entire cognitive load of carrying the conversation off of your shoulders.
It is the ultimate social and professional tool for gathering vast amounts of information while simultaneously making the counterpart feel important and validated.
But back inside the bank, this cumulative application of the DJ voice, the surgical mirroring, and the intentional, agonizing slowing of time is about to trigger the climax of the entire multi-hour standoff.
There we go.
Watts drops the receiver, and suddenly, a completely new, unfamiliar voice comes over the line. It's the accomplice. We later learned his name is Bobby Goodwin.
Bobby Goodwin.
And the auditory environment is chaotic. Bobby is speaking through a towel or a heavy sweatshirt, desperately trying to muffle and disguise his voice.
He's panicked.
He is jumpy, his breathing is erratic, he is terrified, and it is instantly clear that he has absolutely no idea how to handle the situation he is in.
The depth of the communication breakdown inside the bank becomes apparent here. Bobby still believed he was talking to Joe, the original NYPD negotiator.
Wait, really?
Yes, the internal dynamic between the robbers was so fragmented and stressful that Bobby didn't even realize the FBI had swapped negotiators hours prior.
Wow, that shows how much of a mess it was in there.
Exactly, and the author makes a brilliant tactical decision. He doesn't correct Bobby.
He just rolled with it.
He simply maintains that incredibly soothing, resonant, downward-inflecting DJ voice. He speaks directly to Bobby's core need for survival, telling him, nobody's going anywhere, nobody's going to get hurt.
He wraps Bobby in an immense, unshakable aura of safety.
And the biological impact is immediate. Within 90 seconds, the erratic jumpiness in Bobby's voice completely dissipates.
90 seconds.
He physically removes the towel from his mouth, his articulation clears up, and he delivers the ultimate validation of the technique. He says, I trust you, Joe.
Bobby realizes the catastrophic reality of his situation. He is in way over his head. He didn't sign up for an armed siege. He thought he was going to quickly drill out an ATM.
Right.
Hearing that resonant, calm voice on the other end of the line becomes his psychological lifeline. He agrees to capitulate. He formally agrees to walk out the front doors of the bank with his hands empty.
But this exact moment serves as a vital lesson in the chaotic reality of implementation.
Oh, this part is so stressful.
The psychological tactics were flawless. They secured a firm verbal agreement for a peaceful, bloodless surrender. But the physical, logistical reality on the ground nearly derailed the entire operation in the final seconds.
This segment of the source document is genuinely anxiety-inducing. Bobby Goodwin, terrified but compliant, walks to the glass front doors of the Chase Manhattan Bank to surrender to the authorities.
And the doors will not open.
They are completely locked, but they are not locked from the inside by the robbers.
No. Hours earlier, during the initial chaotic phase of the standoff, the police SWAT team had quietly approached the building and barricaded the front doors from the outside.
Right.
To guarantee the robbers couldn't initiate a sudden, violent escape into the neighborhood.
Which in isolation makes perfect tactical sense for perimeter control.
It makes perfect sense.
Ugh.
But the failure was systemic.
How?
In the highly siloed, extreme stress environment of the massive police response, nobody on a tactical SWAT team remembered to inform the negotiation team inside the NOC about the barricade.
Oh, man.
When the negotiators, hyper-focused on the phone line, never thought to ask about the status of the exits.
So Bobby, operating on an absolute razor's edge of panic and adrenaline, attempts to execute his surrender and discovers he is locked inside a cage.
The author vividly describes the sickening feeling in his stomach as he realized that every ounce of trust he had meticulously built over the last hour could instantly evaporate.
Of course.
Bobby had every reason to believe he was being lured into a fatal trap.
So how do they resolve a barricaded door with a panic hostage-taker standing on the other side of the glass?
The SWAT team has to execute a terrifying scramble.
I can't even imagine.
2 heavily armored officers are forced to move slowly and deliberately toward the completely exposed glass front entrance.
Oh, jeez.
Wielding ballistic shields and drawn weapons, fully vulnerable to whatever crossfire might be waiting in the shadows of the bank lobby.
Just to unbolt the doors.
Simply to unbolt the doors they themselves had secured. It is an incredibly tense, volatile moment where a single twitch or misinterpreted shadow could have easily triggered a devastating firefight.
If we connect this near disaster to the bigger picture of organizational behavior, it delivers such a profound lesson.
Absolutely.
You can possess the most brilliant, highly refined negotiation strategy in your industry. You can have the psychological profiling dialed in perfectly. But if there are systemic communication breakdowns within your own organization, if the left hand of the tactical team doesn't know what the right hand of the negotiation team is doing, the entire deal can violently unravel at the 1-yard line.
Execution and interdepartmental communication are just as critical as the persuasion itself. But thankfully, the SWAT officers maintain their discipline. They successfully unbarricade the glass doors, and Bobby Goodwin steps out into the sunlight with his hands raised.
Okay. One adversary neutralized. But the moment Bobby is in custody, the command center gets the full intelligence debrief from him, and the entire narrative of the day collapses.
The truth comes out.
They learn the absolute truth. There is no multinational terror cell. There is no phantom army of mercenaries waiting in the vault.
Nope.
There is exactly one individual left inside the bank, Chris Voss.
And this definitive revelation triggers a massive cascade of bruised ego and operational panic from the senior commander in charge of the scene.
The commander who had been talking to the press.
Remember, this commander has spent the entire day briefing the media, justifying the massive deployment of resources by claiming they're facing a highly complex, sophisticated threat.
Right.
Now he is forced to confront the reality that he has been outmaneuvered and paralyzed for hours by a local cash courier.
That's gotta hurt.
He is deeply angry, he is humiliated, and he makes a rash, highly emotional tactical decision.
What does he do?
He orders the Technical Assistance Response Unit (TARRU) to approach the exterior of the bank and drill a covert listening device, a bug, directly through the concrete wall.
While the negotiation is still actively happening on the phone.
Precisely. The author is currently huddled in a debrief with Bobby, so the FBI rotates in a new primary negotiator, a legendary closer named Dominic Messino, to take over the phone with Chris Voss.
Okay.
Dominic is expertly plowing ahead, working to reestablish the baseline of rapport, and suddenly the deafening scream of an industrial electric drill starts tearing through the masonry right behind Chris Watts' head.
I literally cannot imagine a more catastrophic time to initiate heavy construction on a hostage site.
It was a disastrously foolish, ego-driven maneuver born out of a leader's frustration and need to assert physical control.
And how did Watts react?
Watts, who is already isolated, cornered, and feeling the psychological weight of his partner's abandonment, reacts to the drilling like a rabid pit bull.
I bet.
He begins screaming into the phone, accusing Dominic of being a liar, convinced an assault team is breaching the wall. He is fully primed to detonate the entire situation and start shooting.
But Dominic Messino, true to his reputation, is completely unflappable.
Dominic's emotional control is extraordinary. He absorbs the verbal assault. He lets Watts rage, refusing to raise his own pitch to match the panic.
Wow.
Eventually, that unshakable grounding demeanor acts as an emotional heat sink, bringing Watts' fury from a boil back down to a simmer.
That's incredible discipline.
But Watts is fully aware that the perimeter is collapsing. So in a final act of desperation, he initiates one last, utterly bizarre distraction tactic.
This specific detail is almost comical if it weren't embedded in such a terrifying context. Watts starts actively destroying the stolen money.
Yeah, he begins frantically squirreling stacks of cash inside the hollow spaces of the bank walls, and he actually starts burning piles of currency in full view of the terrified hostages.
What could possibly be the internal logic of burning cash when you are entirely surrounded by heavily armed SWAT teams?
Within the twisted, hyper-stressed logic of a cornered criminal mind facing imminent capture, it represented a grasp at future control.
Future control.
He calculated that if he burned, for example, $50,000, and the bank auditors eventually reported $300,000 missing, the federal authorities would logically assume the missing $250,000 had also been consumed by the fire.
Oh.
He was actively trying to manufacture an accounting discrepancy so that if he somehow miraculously survived a prison sentence, he could return to the bank years later and retrieve the hidden cash from the walls.
It is a stunning, tragic look into how the human brain desperately attempts to maintain an illusion of control and future planning, even when the immediate reality is absolute, undeniable doom.
But the reality of the perimeter does inevitably catch up with him. Dominic Messino meticulously negotiates the sequential release of the remaining tellers.
Okay.
Finally, entirely out of options, Chris Watts walks out the front doors and surrenders to the tactical team.
And the author notes a highly poignant, telling detail from the moment of capture, right?
He does. Right up until the cold metal of the handcuffs clicked, closed around his wrists, Watts' eyes were darting frantically back and forth,
Still looking for a way out.
continuously scanning the perimeter, searching for an impossible escape route. He never truly surrendered the illusion of control until the physical restraints forced him to.
The standoff concludes. The hostages survive. Not a single casualty. On paper, it goes down as a massive operational success for the FBI.
A huge win.
But as the author explicitly points out, the real magic of these highly refined psychological tactics isn't restricted to crisis intervention.
Not at all.
These tools, the deep resonance of the DJ voice, the surgical deployment of mirroring, the agonizing but necessary intentional pause, they form what he calls a conversational Swiss Army knife.
Engineered to solve the friction of our daily lives.
Exactly. So let's take these tools out of the extreme environment of the bank and apply them directly to the corporate office.
The transition from an armed standoff in Brooklyn to a tense corporate boardroom is remarkably seamless because the underlying architecture of human psychology remains constant.
Right.
The amygdala does not know the difference between a physical threat and a threat to one's ego or livelihood. The author explicitly frames mirroring technique as a professional superpower that allows you to disagree without being disagreeable.
Which is the holy grail of office politics.
It absolutely is. Consider the standard architecture of the modern workplace.
Okay.
Almost every organization harbors someone in a position of authority who operates with an aggressive, old-school command and control philosophy.
The corporate pit bull.
Exactly. These are forceful type A personalities who interpret any form of logical pushback or questioning as direct insubordination. They do not want collaboration, they want instant consent.
And if you fight them on it?
If you attempt to confront a corporate pit bull with a pit bull posture of your own, relying on the assertive voice and blunt logic, you inevitably generate a messy, destructive fight, bruised egos, and long-term resentment.
So how do we effectively handle the corporate pit bull utilizing FBI hostage tactics? The text lays out a highly specific 4-step confrontation framework designed to dismantle their demands without triggering their defenses. Let's walk through it.
Okay, so the framework is sequential. Step 1. Actively adopt the late-night FM DJ voice.
Step 1, DJ voice.
You must consciously slow your tempo and lower your vocal pitch before you speak.
Okay. Step 2.
Step 2.
Right.
Begin your sentence with the phrase, "I'm sorry."
I'm sorry.
This is critical because it immediately disarms the counterpart. It signals deference and momentarily scrambles their expectation of resistance.
All right. What's step 3?
Step 3. Deliver the mirror. Repeat the critical 1 to 3 words of their unreasonable demand, but ensure you deliver it with an inquisitive upward inflection.
So it sounds like a question.
Yes. You are framing it as a genuine quest for understanding.
And then?
Step 4. Silence. You must shut your mouth and wait a minimum of 4 seconds to allow the mirror to process in their brain.
4 seconds can feel like an eternity.
And then step 5. Repeat the process sequentially as necessary until they unravel their own logic.
To see this framework in action, let's examine the brilliant case study the author provides from one of his own negotiation students.
This is a great example.
This student was plagued by a boss who was notorious for the corporate drive-by. He would constantly pop his head into her cubicle and assign highly urgent, poorly conceived tasks that created mountains of entirely unnecessary busy work.
We all know that boss.
And he was incredibly defensive about his authority. If she ever dared to say, "There's a faster way to do this," he immediately interpreted it as a sign of laziness and insubordination.
This is a textbook ego-driven dynamic. So the student is nearing the conclusion of a massive, exhausting project that had generated thousands of digital documents.
Right.
The boss, who is old school and highly skeptical of cloud storage, swings by her desk. He pops his head in and casually demands, "Let's make 2 copies of all the paperwork."
Which, in practical terms, is a logistical nightmare. It would commit her to a full week of mindless, standing at the copier drudgery.
Right.
Her natural human instinct is almost certainly to scream, "Are you out of your mind?" Or to launch into a logical defense of digital redundancy.
But she doesn't.
No. Instead of fighting, she deploys the framework. She lowers her pitch, hits him with the DJ voice, and says, "I'm sorry, 2 copies."
Notice the critical intention driving that mirror.
What do you mean?
The internal posture behind the mirror must genuinely be, "Please, help me understand your vision." If she had challenged him with a direct question like, "What do you mean by that?" or "Why do we need 2?" the boss's amygdala would have instantly flagged it as a challenge to his authority.
And he would have dug in?
He would have entrenched his position. But the inquisitive mirror forces the boss to hear his own words spoken aloud and compels him to elaborate on his rationale. The boss replies, "Yes, 1 for us and 1 for the customer."
So she stays in the framework and mirrors him a second time. She says, "I'm sorry, so you're saying that the client is asking for a hard copy and we need a physical copy for internal use."
And this specific mirror prompts the boss to actually pause and cross-reference his demand with reality.
He realizes he made it up.
He realizes upon reflection that the client never actually requested physical binders. He replies, "Actually, I'll check with the client. They haven't asked for anything. But I definitely want a copy. That's just how I do business."
He is retreating slightly, but he is still desperately clinging to his authority. He still wants his copies.
Right.
So she validates his authority while guiding him into a logistical corner. She says, "Absolutely. Thanks for checking with the customer. Where would you like to store the in-house copy? There's no more space in the file room here."
The boss gets slightly perturbed by the logistical friction and waves his hand dismissively. "It's fine. You can store it anywhere."
And here's the kill shot. The final, perfectly placed mirror. She looks at him, maintains the calm, deferential tone, and simply says, anywhere.
That single word mirror is devastatingly effective. It forces the boss to immediately confront the physical impossibility of his own demand.
He has to think about where thousands of documents will go.
He has to visualize thousands of documents with literally nowhere to put them. The single word causes him to take a long, deep pause.
And she stays quiet.
The student adheres strictly to step 4. She remains perfectly silent, letting the discomfort build. Finally, the cognitive dissonance breaks him.
What does he say?
He realizes the absolute absurdity of his own idea. He says, as a matter of fact, you can put them in my office. I'll get the new assistant to print it for me after the project is done. For now, just create 2 digital backups.
Wow, and just like that, through the strategic application of echoing, the boss completely talks himself out of his own terrible idea.
Yep.
He settles for the digital backups she wanted all along. She saved herself an entire week of grueling, pointless work, and she accomplished it without ever explicitly uttering the word no.
Without ever presenting a counter-argument.
And while making the boss feel completely dominant and in charge the entire time, it is the ultimate display of corporate jujitsu.
It is masterful. And it leads to one final, incredible example of this precise skill set in action.
Who is it?
Well, when the author lectures and asks his audience to name the greatest negotiator of all time, the common answers are always titans of industry, historical diplomats, or ruthless corporate raiders.
Right.
But the author's answer is Oprah Winfrey.
Oprah. I love this paradigm shift. Why does a former FBI hostage negotiator consider a daytime talk show host to be the pinnacle of his profession?
Because if you strip away the context, the fundamental language of negotiation is the language of rapport, emotional intelligence, and trust building.
Okay.
Analyze the seemingly impossible task Oprah performed on her daily television show for decades.
That's pretty wild.
She sat face-to-face with strangers, illuminated by harsh studio lights, surrounded by a live, reacting audience with tens of millions of people watching from home.
A pressure cooker.
And her objective was to gently persuade that person, often acting entirely against their own legal or reputational best interests, to voluntarily surrender their deepest, darkest, most closely guarded traumas and secrets to the world.
Secrets they had successfully held hostage within the vault of their own minds for an entire lifetime.
Exactly.
And she didn't achieve that by acting like a prosecutor. She didn't cross-examine them or corner them with logic.
Not at all. If you study her interviews closely through the specific lens of the behavioral tactics we've discussed today, you are watching a grandmaster practitioner deploying a highly refined, hidden arsenal.
What does she do?
She utilizes a warm, conscious physical smile to instantly lower the guest's biological defenses.
The playful voice.
Yes. She deploys subtle verbal mirroring, repeating the agonizing ends of their sentences to signal deep, unbroken empathy.
Wow.
She leans heavily on that calm, resonant, downward inflection in her vocal delivery to create an impenetrable bubble of safety amidst the chaos of a television studio.
That makes perfect sense.
She doesn't force people to surrender their secrets. She creates an environment so profoundly validating that they willingly hand them over simply because they finally feel, perhaps for the first time in their lives, profoundly and completely heard.
So let's recap the incredible trajectory of this deep dive. We started amidst the terror of an armed standoff in a Brooklyn bank.
We did.
We observed how highly trained law enforcement commanders stumbled because they relied on rigid, arrogant assumptions rather than adopting a fluid mindset of discovery.
Right.
We uncovered the biological reality that to truly listen to another human being, we must actively quiet the overlapping schizophrenic voices in our own heads by focusing our entire cognitive bandwidth on identifying the underlying needs of our counterpart.
Needs over wants.
Exactly. We saw how intentionally slowing the tempo of a conversation can buy life-saving investigative time and drain the volatility from a crisis.
Slower is faster.
And we decoded the tactical mechanics of the late-night FM DJ voice and the Jedi mind trick of mirroring repeating those critical last 3 words to generate unconscious trust, bypass defensive barriers, and keep the adversary talking.
And crucially, we translated those extreme, high-stakes tactical maneuvers into a seamless framework that can be utilized to peacefully disarm a toxic boss and save you from the drudgery of pointless corporate paperwork.
To the listener tuning in right now, keep this central truth firmly in mind. The ultimate goal of negotiation, whether you are trying to secure the release of hostages or simply trying to secure a hotel room upgrade, is not to win a battle of arguments.
No, it's not.
It is to engage in a process of discovery. The very next time you find yourself trapped in a heated boardroom meeting or navigating a tense, emotional conversation at your own dinner table, remember that you do not need to burn your energy formulating a brilliant, crushing counterargument.
You don't.
You do not need to dominate the logic. You just need to deploy a conscious physical smile, utilize a calming downward inflection, casually repeat the last three words they said to you, and summon the immense emotional courage to simply stay silent and let the mirror do the work.
This raises an important question, and it provides a final provocative thought to leave you with, building directly upon the core neurological premises we've explored today.
Okay, lay it on us.
The source material definitively establishes that our conscious minds are continuously overwhelmed by the chaotic, schizophrenic voices echoing inside our own heads.
Yes.
It also biologically proves that our vocal tone acts as a literal physical switch, that a low, slow, downward inflecting frequency can trigger involuntary neurological telepathy, reaching across a physical divide to turn a stranger's distrust into trust and their panic into profound calm.
Okay, so where are you going with this?
So here's something to deeply mull over.
I'm listening.
If the late-night FM DJ voice and the positive, playful voice possess such immense biological power that they can successfully calm a hostile, armed adversary barricaded inside a building across the street,
Yeah.
what would happen if we consciously began utilizing those exact same vocal tones and frequencies on our own internal monologue?
Oh, wow.
If we purposefully and consistently mirrored our own internal anxieties with a calm, validating downward inflection within the privacy of our own minds, could we essentially deploy FBI crisis tactics on ourselves?
That is fascinating.
Could we, in effect, negotiate our own minds out of our daily emotional hostage situations?
Wow. Negotiating your own mind out of an emotional hostage situation. That is an incredible, profound reframing of the entire skill set. Thank you for joining us for this custom deep dive. Keep questioning your assumptions, keep discovering the hidden variables, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.